Welcome to Birds in the Sky, the podcast where we explore how making art and music can be powerful tools for boosting mental health and well-being. Whether you're an artist, a musician, or simply someone looking for new ways to nurture your mind, we'll dive into creative practices, share inspiring stories, and uncover how the act of creating can lead to healing, self-discovery, and growth. Tune in and let your creativity carry you forward. I'm your host, Matthew Crane. Let's fly. Welcome to another episode of Birds in the Sky podcast. I am your host, Matthew Crane. Today, we have Melanie Stang in the house. She is an artist, a musician, a theater practitioner. She is an educator as well. She ran her own music school for little ones. Melanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we actually went to the same high school, Frontier Central High School in Hamburg, New York. I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that it pumps out an incredible amount of talented musicians, actors, painters, all kinds of stuff. Did you practice music and theater in high school when you were there?
I did. I went there specifically for music and theater.
Really?
So I grew up in Lackawanna, and I went to Catholic school, and my parents moved to Blaisdell just so I could go to Frontier.
I didn't know that. Awesome. So was it everything that you had hoped it would be?
Yeah. Oh, and more, for sure. Yeah. Mr. Larry Albert was there. So I didn't realize that when I went there, they also had a great music department. So I started playing guitar. And he, as well as Mrs. Vodo, just saw the talent that I had and nurtured it from freshman year to senior year.
I had Mr. Albert as a guitar teacher at Frontier, and I loved him as a teacher because he was actually the only one who would call me on bullshit.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I can gaff along all of the history teachers and the English department or whatever, but when it came to learning a guitar part or a pass or something, I would make up some BS excuse. Oh, was it lacrosse practice? And he wouldn't have it.
Oh no, I tried trying out for cheerleading, and he's like, no, you can't do that. You're an artist, you are a singer, so you're gonna lose your voice. So yeah, totally.
It takes a good teacher to kind of drive somebody, because he was the first person, when I would try to BS him about a guitar lesson, he would say, you're good. You're better than what you're putting in.
Yes.
That kind of thing. You're better or have more potential than what you're putting into it. And that actually stuck with me more than any other teacher at the time. And, it made me work a little harder at home and learn the things. It was a Blue Oyster called Don't Fear the Reaper, learning the solo of that.
Yeah, I totally know what you're talking about, yeah.
The song was easy enough, but the solo was something that he was teaching the class. And there's some specific, picking technique to it and stuff, and he wanted it right. And anyways, that's a great aside.
Well, I feel like you and I have similar backgrounds because all of your friends played sports and that was your crew. So same thing with me. So when I was in the theater community, and I feel like it's kind of similar today, and did music, I was very preoccupied with being popular and having friends that were athletes and whatnot. So he called me out on that all the time and was like, no, you're good. And I was the only girl in that class, so he made me sing all the songs. So he's like, well, you're going to learn how to play, and then you're also going to learn how to play and sing. Which was there's a bunch of hippie guys in the class, and here I am, Miss student government president playing guitar in it, but it was awesome. It that definitely helped for my next chapter in music, and then being in the musicals helped for my next chapter in theater.
Before we jump into that next chapter, so when you decided, your family, it takes a lot for a family to say, hey, we're going to leave one school district and go to another so our daughter can have the opportunity she wants. Was that something that they wanted for you, or was that something that you were kicking down the door for them to do this for you?
It was both. So I started singing at a really young age, and, we see our kids and they're singing and having fun, and they're like, oh, maybe they'll do that. Well, my parents were like, no, I feel like my kid could actually do this. So I was doing talent competitions, and then my teachers in my Catholic school saw that I could sing, and they put me up front, in mass and in whatever productions we were doing in grammar school. So it was a combination of me loving it and my parents 1,000% supporting me in it. And then together, all my friends went to Mount Mercy, where they had at the time, now they have a great program. At the time, they just had those bells.
Okay. Yeah. The glockenspiel.
Yeah. And I was like, no, I don't think so. So, I went to Frontier not knowing anybody. And I was totally cool with that. And my parents were they divorced when I was really young. And me as a performer was the one thing they agreed upon.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes. And they shared that. And I think that's another reason why I continued doing it, because all of my family members could come and see me in a show and be in front of each other and create, civil relationships. It's the same thing today, which is really cool.
You're very blessed to have such a supportive, you want to be an artist? We're all in.
Yes.
That's no artist story.
You're right. And I think that added a whole lot of pressure, to me in the future. And even like now, where everybody thought I was going to be on Broadway. Everybody thought that I was going to have like a record, like sign record label. Right. Mm-hmm. So when that did not happen yet. Yet, right? Win a Tony at 60. It happens.
You can't do it unless your tools are sharp.
Yes.
You got to keep your tools sharp.
1,000%. But yeah, so when that didn't happen, disappointment as an artist is the biggest downfall you can have.
But to continue, I think one would say, to continue to be an artist, disappointment is something you have to really get over quickly and accept that it is going to be a part of your journey the entire way through.
1,000%.
It takes, as an artist, it takes a lot of kind of insane, misguided ambition to continue down this road of creation. And I know why I do it, but that's part of this podcast. I want to know why you do it. What is it, how does it make you feel to be on any size stage and perform something that you've rehearsed and it be received?
It's the best feeling in the world. And first and foremost, having the opportunity to do that is so euphoric. Mm-hmm. And there's the anxiety, the anticipation, the challenge, and for every artist, I feel like when, at least especially artists that are on stage, you get to that point of you're not quite sure if you're gonna have a panic attack or if you're gonna just explode aesthetics, or just emotion, everything. And that's, for me, is really trying to always get to that point. And I try to teach my students this as well, where the same emotion that anxiety is in your body is the same emotion as excitement. And so to get to that level when you're on stage and have that, in between and allowing it to just explode in storytelling is the most amazing feeling ever.
Let's go back to graduating from Frontier High School in Hamburg, New York. Little old Hamburg, New York.
Yes.
What was your next step from there?
So I went to SUNY New Paltz. I wanted to get as far away from Buffalo as possible because it wasn't the city it is now. And so New Paltz is right in the Hudson Valley, about an hour and 20 north of New York. And I went there for theater arts. It was hard to pick a major because you couldn't go to college to be a Broadway star. You couldn't go to college to be a rock star. You had to, and I wanted to do both. I still continue to want to do both, which is,
we all do.
Yes, exactly. But you couldn't, you had to pick. So New Paltz, their program was great because it was just a well-rounded theater education. And I, did acting, I did musical theater, I did dance, I did stage combat, I did improv, but then I did all of the technical aspects of theater, costuming, lighting, stage managing, which grew my empathy for all of the other parts, right? And the understanding of what goes into it. I've never had an ego, but like, if anything, that definitely prevented me from having even more of an ego to understand and respect every part of a production. But then when I was in New Paltz, I started, it was a very artistic college, just in the mountains, lots of hippies, just so, I say that just because I feel like I've always been in between of this trying to be like a preppy, straight edge, put together person, but I'm also just such a hippie at heart and creative and free spirited. And when I'm around those kinds of people, my creativity just unwinds. And so I started songwriting. I started expanding my guitar playing there. And then I moved to New York after college.
Yeah. What did you find the creative scene in New York to be like? What year was this?
2004.
2004.
Yes.
Okay. What was going on in New York City in the theater and arts community, in the music community?
It's so weird because I think about it and I was like, oh my gosh, like 9/11 happened 3 years before that. And I'm just like, I'm going to New York. Like, no thoughts about anything in terms of how safe it was or the rebuilding. It was just like always my goal. So I went. And it's hard to say, it was before social media. So I had to go to Colony, I think it was called, where I had to get sheet music. I had to buy sheet music. I had to go to the library because I couldn't afford a computer to like print out my resume and my hard copy of my headshot. So the theater scene it's very similar to what it is now. It's catechol. Just like going to a room, not sure if you're going to be seen, trying to make contacts, trying to be the best, and then just doing that every single day. Mm-hmm. And the added, I think, is that that actors have the social media now to be able to promote themselves, in which is a little easier, I guess, but it's still very hard. But then the music scene, which I wasn't planning on getting into, so I answered an ad that said, it was a full page ad, and it said, looking for a female Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And I was like, that is dope. Like, I want to be in that band.
Your inner hippie can fly.
Yes, like, exactly.
It's getting to the point.
Oh my gosh, we did that song. We actually sang that song. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm definitely auditioning for this. And so that led to me being in my band that I was with for 7 out of the 8 years that I lived in New York.
What was that band called?
The Shells.
The Shells.
Originally, it was called Bombshell. We went through lots and lots of changes.
As you do.
Exactly. Yes. And so we evolved in it. We had our manager, who was also a songwriter at the time, was the one that did the ad. We answered the ad, 3 random girls, all blondes, which is why we did Bombshell. Got in front of some industry people, and they said, okay, she has to go. You need to go on Proactive. You need to lose weight and also get rid of your manager and write different songs. So we did.
So that's basically, you want us to strip this down and start all over with different people? What are we talking about here?
So
that sounds I can 100% hear that coming out.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was actually Sting's manager that said that to us.
Sure.
I swear, because we ended up having a business manager. It was a very well-known business manager. He had lots of, I think Sting was his business. Like, he was Sting's business manager. John Legend. The music industry is just insane. How you can, in New York, how you can get those interviews, right? But it is a very long process to get to where you want to go, obviously. So yeah, so the two of us that they actually liked continued. We got another girl. I started writing our music for at least the first couple of years, and then we all started writing together and started touring the country, started touring New York, got to Nashville, got in front of more industry people, went to California, had wanted to do a reality series on us, just a lot of opportunities. And, things in the midst of all of it. It was 3 girls, right? Our relationship was kind of rocky. Also, it was really expensive. Like I couldn't keep up financially. You not only had to worry about hair and makeup, but you were taking these industry people out on your own dime, right? You were renting your own studio to do showcases for them in. So it just got to be a lot on my mind and on my heart because I just wanted to play music.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pay to play out there in the world. And,
yes.
And unfortunately, America is as it is in a capitalist economic system. And, there's no way to really get around that. I mean, you can really market and commodify anything. But this was a kind of a departure from your original goal, right? So your theater was kind of your thing. And here you are now, like, you're traveling the country in a band, and like that's kind of not what you set out to do, but you followed the opportunity as any good artist should.
Yes.
What brought you back to Buffalo, New York?
Well,
were there any other stops on the way?
I almost moved to Austin.
Okay.
So I moved back home, not planning on staying whatsoever. I was like, nope. Like I love my family. I love home, obviously, but I came home to regroup. Really, New York had taken everything out of me, and the only place you go back to is home. So I was planning on moving to Austin. My sister was in Houston at the time. She's in Dallas now, but I was planning on moving to Austin because 600 music venues in a 6-mile radius, keep Austin weird, right? I went to ACL, to the music festival. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to live here. Ironically, which probably led to my school down the road, but they had this like crazy like kids section, which was its own music festival in itself, which I would love to do one day. So all of it was just amazing. And then, I don't know, I started like meeting your friends. I met Evan and I met Scott. I ran DBGB's open mic for 3 years. And that was through Brandy McLaughlin and Crystal Smith. And Scott was my DJ at the open mic afterwards. It was like our Monday fun days. And I went to Merge and played their open mic.
R.I.P. Merge.
I know. Oh,
it was a great vegetarian and vegan friendly restaurant.
Wings, really.
Yeah, they were really good.
Yeah, Satan. Yeah. So I was experiencing the resurgence of Buffalo, and it really got a hold of me, and I didn't even know about the theater community at that time. Like this was 2011. So and then I met my husband eventually through all these like hippie artistic people. I meet this total sports, for lack of a better word, meathead guy.
He's our Gronk.
He is your Gronk.
Yeah, he's my
Gronk. For sure. Oh my gosh. That's perfect explanation. But I found this place where I could continue doing what I love. And it was obviously much cheaper. I had the support of my family. And, and then I eventually started my own family.
What would it do to you to not be able to practice music or perform or just engage creatively with the world?
I don't even think I have an answer because I know, my children are everything. And I would probably and I do find ways for them to experience it if I can't experience it. But I don't think they could experience it if I wasn't experiencing it, right? So my life would be so different. I would have to find something else creative.
So it's essential.
It's unbelievably essential for my soul, and it's one of those things. I've had people refer to it as a hobby. And I just don't understand that because I'm going to be doing it until I'm 100. And it's not a hobby. It's something that is in the core of my life, for sure. So I'm not sure. I think it'd be very sad.
And then that leads me into your music school. You started Mel School of Music.
And
Mel
theater.
was an acronym for Music Equals Love. Yes.
Yep.
And what was the age demographic that you were targeting as far as students?
3 to 18. But our most success I would say grades 3 through 7 was grades 3 through 7, and then like sophomore, juniors in high school. We'd have the most success with those kids.
And what was the catalyst to that? Because starting any business is daunting.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about starting a business in the arts space, which is, a double no.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be teaching music to students. And it was in the Frontier District, wasn't it?
Yes.
The school?
Yes.
And take me through why you just started. What was so important for you to make that commitment?
Well, I mean, it's a crazy story. So when I was in New York, I worked at restaurants, I worked at bars, because that's how you make money. I mean, I did other things. I did like kids entertainment and whatnot. And when I moved back home to Buffalo, I was doing the same thing. Then, which led me, also had working at TBGB's, led me to run Expo Market. Do you remember Expo on Main Street? So I was a general manager there. And because I was there, I had to become a part of this theater community that I had no idea existed, because I wanted to do business with them. We had like Curtain Up at Expo once. Like I was the catalyst for that. And I met Mary Kate O'Connell at this like woman in business thing, and I fell in love with her. And so being in that job, I saw all the potential. But I didn't know that there were any schools. And growing up, I didn't have any schools that I could go to. So I remember I asked my boss for a raise. I'm not gonna say my bosses, but I asked him for a raise, and he said, we're actually gonna go in a different direction. And I was crushed, because I had put a lot into that job. And as I'm driving down Route 5 to go home, I literally saw a for rent sign. And I was just like, I'm opening up a music and theater school. And I called my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, and he said, okay. And we had one of our 3 daughters at the time. She was older. He's like, all right, let's do it. And I made a business plan from the experience that I had from running bars and restaurants. And I also, just like I usually do with everything, I just made a vision board, and I wanted to see, what I wanted this to look like. I knew I wanted private lessons. One of my friends from college actually moved to Buffalo because his wife is from here. He was a guitar teacher, Greg Barisi. I reached out to him. I reached out to RJ Akinfora, because Mr. Akinfora, who worked at Frontier, told me that his son wanted to teach drums. And I kind of just started just putting out the energy. And it took me, I got let go in November, and I opened Mel's in January of 2017, 2018.
Yeah, that's an ambitious.
I know.
So that's literally just a spur of the moment.
Yeah, but it was leading up to, I did kids entertainment in New York, which was so fun. So I wanted birthdays integrated with this. That's what I did. I did a lot of birthdays. And when I moved back home, I did teach lessons. I taught at Performing Arts in Lancaster, I think. And then I taught at some dance studios. I did theater classes. That was my way of getting back into it. Some friends from high school asked me if I could do private lessons with their kids. So I was doing that out of my home. So I was doing some sort of teaching while running these places, and it got to be too much at home because I had my child and I didn't want my husband stuck in his bedroom. We still lived in an apartment at that time. So that combined with, really knowing more about the theater community in Buffalo. And then, yes, I was like, ambition, let's go.
Yeah. Do you push music or theater or anything like that on your children?
I don't. They're just around it. And so Riley, my oldest, who was just in Alleyway Theater's A Christmas Carol and is now getting calls to be in movies and gets the lead in her school musicals. She was there. I didn't have a babysitter all the time. And she was old enough to be a part of it,
Sure.
Without distracting. And so I think the first kid musical we did was Willy Wonka? Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, Alice in Wonderland. So she was a flower, and then she was an Oompa Loompa.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then 4 years later, she's playing Fiona, right? So she was just always around it. And now that she's around it and I'm in the house practicing all my lines for my kids and practicing my auditions, my other two are just hooked as well. And so it's never pushed. It's just the environment they live in. I'm really hoping that one plays basketball because
for Ryan's sake, for volleyball or something.
Yes, or in my sake to divide and conquer. So hopefully, when the sun comes up, we can start shooting hoops.
Girls flag football is getting a big push from the NFL, so that's a thing.
I did see that, and that would be exciting as well.
Yeah, well, you could do both.
You can, and I did. I did both growing up. Fall sports, spring musical. Yeah.
Let me jump right back to teaching it. Do you have any good impact stories about some of your students that came through your school and now you're seeing them continue on?
So many. I think when I started the school the LGBTQ community has been through so much through the last however many years, forever. But I feel like within the last 10 years, youth particularly has been more open, and thankfully, right? But also has had so much backlash. And I have had students that were a part of Mel's that, being a non-binary student in theater it was difficult, and I'm hoping that it won't be in the future when people start writing, characters for these people. But that was challenging for these kids to go to their school and not really have a place or a character to audition for, right? They didn't feel like they fit in. And so a couple of my kids, we were we were edgier with our musicals. We did Stephen Sondheim's Company, and I had a non-binary Bobby. And, after that show, that student had gotten a huge part in their musical, and then played Mary Sunshine at Narden's, school, and now is going to college for music education. And I remember they were in 8th grade, and their parents had felt very hopeless, at that point. So between 8th grade and now, extreme difference. And I would like to think that we created, my directors, and then also my students created this safe space for them and so many others that were in that same situation, be able to find their place in the theater community, in the music, community, in the art community.
That's amazing that you had a space to offer that kind of safe, inclusive space.
Yes, absolutely.
I really think theaters and playhouses have always played that role.
Oh my gosh.
Going back from the Greek times till now.
Absolutely.
And Moulin Rouge is the best probably pop culture example to highlight this.
Totally.
But, when you're not wanted or welcomed at home because you're a misfit or a little different, where else can you go? Well, the only other places are sports arenas. Well, you're not really welcome there, historically either.
Yes.
But in the theater, the playhouse, Shakespeare wrote a lot of roles that were very ambiguous.
Absolutely.
And if there was a male actor on stage playing 3 different roles, one of them is going to be a woman. You're putting a dress on.
Yep.
And it's for the sake of telling the story, right? But it's very attractive to young people still because of the safe, inclusive nature and the playful nature of theater. But then the richness comes, which I think a lot of people on the outside, when they think of theater or plays or musicals, they're not thinking about the text itself. If you strip away the lights, the camera, or the costumes, there's a text behind every TV show you watch.
Absolutely,
there is text behind that, and that is where, if it's good art, is where the the real depth and humanity is. And that's something people come for the safety, but then they find a connection to the history of humankind. Because ultimately, theater is storytelling.
Yes.
And we would not be a human species where we are today without the ability to tell stories, to have an elder tell you how things were a couple winters ago and why we should prepare and have enough food because of a story he's telling, right?
Totally.
You know, so like storytelling is so fundamental to survival as human beings. So it's an amazing thing that you had that space to offer to young people.
Yeah, it was, I mean, and I needed it too, right? Like having my first daughter and then COVID happens, right? And we went virtual for a while. I just had my second daughter right before the pandemic. And then I had a third daughter, you know, like a year later. So for me, you know, I wanted to keep my school alive. And I could only do that by doing virtual classes and then even doing outdoor shows, and which we did. And so like I needed that space just as much as they did. And I don't think they understood that, you know, but it was just as important for me to be able to be myself, because I'm a huge weirdo. And, you know, I'm like, sometimes your family accepts that, sometimes they don't. Really depends on the day, you know? So being around other weirdos, whether they're 8 years old or 15 years old, was, you know, really important to me.
Well, what do you got coming up next, Mel?
So this is actually the first year that I was able to do multiple shows in the Buffalo theater community. I started audition in 2019, and I've been in just like one show every year. Not always a main stage, even if it's like a cabaret or, you know, something like starring Buffalo. But I was just in Bellissima as Bonnie and Clyde. And next up, I have The Hobbit at Theater of Youth, which I'm really excited about.
I love the Theater of Youth.
Yes.
My ex-wife has done a number of shows there.
And she's my dialect coach.
Very cool. Very cool. They do awesome work over there. I've taken my sons to a few shows there. It's super cool. So The Hobbit, when does that open up?
February 25th. Yes. Oh my gosh, I hope I got that right. Goes through March 16th.
March 16th, the show is open at Theater of Youth. It's The Hobbit.
Yes,
and
it's
which characters do you get to play?
So I'm the understudy for Anna Krempholz, who's amazing. And she's principal, I'm understudy. And so I play the most characters out of all 5 actors. Gandalf, Gollum, Bombard the dwarf, the Elven Queen, Troll, and an eagle.
The dwarf is my favorite.
Nobody
tosses a dwarf.
This is a very silly, he's like the big dwarf in the movie, but he's very silly, very lighthearted. The way that that Megan Callahan is teaching us the dialects, because each one has obviously a very distinct voice. It was just kind of like the north, south, east, west of London, going from, you know, posh British to Cockney. So that's been really fun to learn their voices. Steve Vaughn's the fight choreographer, and Chris Kelly, the director, really talking about a lot of physical work and finding the difference between each character, because it, like, you're off as Gandalf and back on as Bomber, which is. I watched the Stumble Through with Anna and all the other amazing actors, and I couldn't stop smiling. It was so fun, and I'm just a huge Hobbit, Lord of the Rings fan. So I'm living out my wildest dreams.
I've had the pleasure of working for Chris a few times. He's directed a couple of shows I was in.
Oh, awesome.
And so I know the timing of the whole thing it's got to clip along.
Absolutely.
So I know what you mean by that. But if you have to change characters and move from a posh London accent into please tell me Gollum has a Cockney accent. What does Gollum sound like?
So I'm like, we actually.
You don't have to give it away.
No, I won't. But like, we actually talked about that, and I think like it definitely more of a northern, like but because he used to be a hobbit, and I feel like,
oh, that's true.
But he's changed so much physically that his voice is so internal, and really like having it like come from like your thighs and your belly, so that because it's gritty and the scene that he's in is so emotional. So it's not just the sound, but just like the physicality of the voice, which is just so fun, exhausting, but so fun.
Well, I can't wait to check it out. Melanie Stang, thank you for coming by.
Thanks
the Birds in the Birds in the Sky podcast. I should know the name of my own show, but we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
I'm new at this. If you like this content, please like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. It'll be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
Yay.
and the YouTube.
Awesome.
Because I'm an old man now. The YouTube. All right. Well, Mel, thanks for coming by. Cheers.
Okay. Bye.
That's it.
Woohoo.